Neat Nation, welcome back to the Drew P. Whiskey Show, where today I'm going to discover my favorite. That's the goal. I mean, I've got an inappropriate amount of whiskey, but today I wanted to pick from the ones that I really appreciate, the ones that I absolutely love, and the ones that I savor the most. And I wanted to see which one's my favorite, because I think I have one that I'm like, yeah, I think that's the one I like the best. But today I'm going to taste my top 4 blind together, which I've never done, and see how they stack up and choose a favorite. These are whiskeys I think you're going to want to get my opinion on, because we're talking about George T. Stagg 2019. We're talking about Old Carter Bourbon Batch 5. That's Indiana Bourbon MGP, right? We're talking about Four Roses LE 2020. And then finally, we are also talking about Elijah Craig Pirate Bottle Barrel Proof. This is the 138.8 proof batch. So these are bangers for sure. Now on the bottom of each of those bottles, I put a color, and that color matches what I put on the bottom of my Glencairns, which have now been sitting here for a couple hours. I poured them and covered them. In my word, there's like a decent amount of condensation. I wonder why that is. Anyway, doesn't matter. I'm going to nose these suckers and taste these suckers, and then choose one of the suckers as the best one, and then that'll be like my favorite. That's the goal. Again, we'll see how it goes. Before we do that, there are links down below for you to peruse. Ways you can support the channel, get more content like this, fun bourbon-y stuff. Which is, I mean, you probably want fun bourbon-y stuff. That's why you clicked on this video in the first place. You're going to get it here, but if you want more of that, those links are for you. There's also ways to get some dank bottles. Mainly that's for our Patreon peeps. We got 3 barrel picks headed to the ways of where our bourbon geeks are at. Neat Nation, those people. Bottles going to those people when they finally get bottled and land anyway. You can learn more at patreon.com/entryproofpodcast. Now let's get into this. I've got 4 Glencairns. 1, 2, 3, 4. We're going to go left to right here. I'm going to nose. I'm going to rank the nose of the 4. And then I'm going to taste. And then I'm going to rank the taste. And then I'm going to pick the best one. And I'm going to try not to take all night on this. But again, these are bangers, so I do want to appreciate the whiskey. The nose on one is kind of musty. I will note the color on these two. I'm not a big color guy, but there is quite a color differential. Nose one is earthy with plenty of charcoal, barbecue sauce, and kind of black pepper vibes. Like, this is definitely a barbecue style whiskey. Not a lot of sweetness on the nose at all on number 1, but lots of dark, what smells like well-aged whiskey. A lot of wood influence, we'll call it that. 2 is much sweeter, more floral. If I had to guess based on the nose, and I know you guys can see the color on these, I cannot see the color of the stickers. They are smiley faces, I can tell that much, and that's because I stole them from my children. So I could use them because I didn't have any other stickers to use. So we got colored smiley faces on these whiskey glasses that pertain to colored smiley faces on the bottles of the bourbons. And that's how we're going to know what they are. I don't remember what the code is. I did it hours ago, and then I shuffled it all around. So my brain, I mean, you guys know I'm just not that smart. That said, if I had to guess what Four Roses was based on the nose without smelling the other 2, I guess it was this one. But it's floral and sweet, and I really enjoy it. Out of the 2, which one do I like better? Probably number 2. But the barbecue sauce on 1 is teasing me, because generally that nasal property means I'm going to get something on the palate that I really, really like. Oh. Nose on 3 is root beer, really big sweetness, buttercream frosting, but get these, my goodness. Like fermented apples, like almost cider. This is definitely the most going on in the nose. My word. I need to smell something else. 3 is the most complex nose so far. Let's hit these again. Yeah, 1 is old and straightforward. Not bad, just very straightforward. 2 is fresh and floral and sweet. 3 is spicy and dynamic with all kinds of flavor vibes from I'm sweet, like brown sugar, buttercream frosting, which you guys know I like the note, and then spicy in terms of like the root beer, cloves, cinnamon, and then there's like a savory something going on up in there too. 3 reminds me of wild turkey. I didn't pour wild turkey. None of these is wild turkey, but that's actually what it most reminds me of. 4, also very, very dark. 4 is also, we're back to earthy. Not quite as oak heavy and like charcoal barbecue as number 1. This one reminds me the most of Buffalo Trace, based on the nose. Kind of fruity, like dried pear. A little creme brulee. So if I had to go just off the nose, I would go Old Carter 5, Four Roses, Elijah Craig, George C. Stagg. That's just my nasal guess, but if I'm ranking the nose, I'm going to go 3. So this is one I thought was Elijah Craig. 3, 2, Four Roses. So 3 is number 1, 2 is number 2, 4 is number 3, and then number 1 is number 4. Like, not bad by any stretch of the imagination. All great noses, but the nose on number 3 is extraordinary. There is so much going on there. Although 3 could be Buffalo Trace too. I just got more nutty funkiness. Whereas 4 just felt more fruity. But who knows? I may come back. I may have mixed up these two. This one may be George C. Stagg, and this one may be Elijah Craig. Regardless, number 3 wins on the nose. Good luck keeping track with all this stuff. So 3 wins on the nose. So gonna go here. All right, onto the palates, shall we? It's heavy. It's heavy and it's sweet. Maple syrup, brown sugar, very straightforward. A lot of oak. Kind of drying on the finish. Not super dry, not like that Remus Batch 5, which I really like, but the finish on that is very dry. This one's a little bit dry. Barbecue kind of holds up. Burn ends of some some nice beef burn ends. That's kind of how it finishes in my mouth. Really great whiskey, but not super complex. Number 2. Cheers. It's the one I thought was Four Roses. Try not to let that bias me. I shouldn't have said that. I should just be like, I'm just gonna drink this now. Cherries, honeysuckle, plenty of oak still, which I like, but not drying by any stretch of the imagination. Kind of an agave nectar style sweetness. Not a ton of heat, not a ton of depth. I mean sweetness. The heat is fine. All these are barrel proof, but none of them are like packing major wallops outside of the Elijah Craig. Number 1 was not very hot. Number 2 is not very hot. 2 is definitely more complex than number 1. I love the straightforwardness of the depth and oak and barbecue smokiness and sweetness of number 1. Number 2 just brings in floral to the party. I like floral. Brings some cherry. I like cherry. But it depends. Like, it totally depends on the night. I'm trying to just view this objectively. Generally, I don't like to pick favorites. I'm not a favorites guy. I feel like picking my favorite child, which I have one of, but I'm not proud of it. That was meant in jest a little bit. All right, number 3. Trying not to get palate fatigue in 15 minutes. Okay. I think I said originally I thought this was Elijah Craig because I thought the nose was a little nutty. I did pick this as the top nose for me. It was very complex. I mentioned that. Sweet and spicy. A lot of weird stuff. But a fun journey for sure. Now as I hit the palate, I'm thinking this is the George T. Stagg. Remember, 2019 George T. Stagg, which is the only one I have. This is my favorites that I have, not my favorites of all time. I don't have infinite access to whiskey. So 2019 is it's in the teens. The proof is not massive. So, and I get a lot of cherry cola. It's like cherry Coke. The oak is not as pronounced. It's not as smoky as whiskey number 1 or number 2. It's very cherry cokey. And it's nice. I like it. It doesn't blow me away. It's not as deep as I would like out of a GTS, whatever. I need to get some water. I gotta flush the pie hole. Sometimes just the lingering burn interferes with those taste buds, at least for me. I got a sensitive palate. A lot of brown sugar, very sweet. So cherry cola, brown sugar. Not the most complex either, but really, really good. Like, hard to hate on number 3 on the palate. Lots of stuff to like. It's a very refined, old whiskey. That's what it tastes like. I've got a rough idea in my mind of how I'm ranking these so far. But number 4, so dark. And now that have tasted these whiskeys, I'm thinking this one's probably the Elijah Craig. It has a big, sweet, straightforward, in-your-face nose. This is definitely the hottest. This has got to be the Elijah Craig. And it's good. It's a big buttercream bomb that'll light your face on fire, but it too is not the most dynamic or complex. Like, I'm not getting layers of flavors. I love layers of flavors, meaning that when I taste a whiskey, it kind of evolves as it goes through the palate. This one comes hard and fast with a big viscous sweetness. The finish is just hot. It's kind of fire, even after I've tasted some other barrel-proof whiskeys. So it's harder to peruse this one, plumb the depths of all this whiskey has to offer. But if you like a big, bold, brash whiskey, that one's probably your one. I mean, it comes hard and fast. It's got some interesting spice notes, certainly in the clove department. Touches of kind of a minty mouthfeel after you swallow, which is interesting because none of these are terribly high rye. The Old Carter would be the highest rye, but kind of leaves your mouth with a menthol kind of cooling almost. Like, it's hot, but then it's kind of cool. It's maybe alcohol evaporation because it's so dang high in alcohol. It's delicious. And all 4 of these are delicious. These are fantastic whiskeys. This is the battle to see which one is my favorite. And it'd be interesting to just pull some rando bourbon off the shelf and throw it in here and see what the disparity is in quality. I have to try and pick the best palette out of one of these and then pick which one in totality I think is best. So I'm going to hit them again, zip through this one more time. One is just plain good. It's plain and it's good. I mean, really good. There's nothing to hate on. There's nothing I can point to and be like, I would change this about it. Because it's really, really good. I think it's kind of what a well-aged bourbon should be, and I wish I could go out and buy a whole bunch of that. Whiskey 2 is one I would swirl. I would sit here like this. And I would just sip it very slowly. It's good. I want a little bit more intense sweetness. 2 is delightful. As I said, very complex, floral, which I love that. But if I'm picking my favorite profile, not just the profile I would go to when I want a floral whiskey, which happens on the regular, I don't know that I'm going to pick 2. All right, back to 3 now. Well, I get a lot of cherry Coke. I gotta say the palate on 3 falls short after the nose. The nose was big and had tons of stuff going on. The palate on 3 is just thin. Number 1 and number 2 are not thin. This one is delicious, but it's thinner. It's not as, like, especially coming back to it on multiple sips, it's not as viscous and mouth-filling as I would want out of an ultra-premium whiskey. Flavor vibes are on point. Like, it is kind of nailed it in terms of like delivering a great older whiskey that's pretty accessible. I would say this is a very accessible whiskey. It is a fun journey, but to me, it just leaves a little bit to be desired in the palate. The more I come back to the palate on one, the more I like it. It is that big, bold, viscous, syrupy delightfulness that I love. And I love the layers of 2, for sure. 3 is just a touch medicinal compared to the other 2. All right, let's hit 4 and let's line them up. Ooh, 4 is a woody fireball. Yeah, just as we talked about, big heater, really interesting woody spice. I mean, definitely, if this is the Elijah Craig like I think it is, it delivers so much more oak than a lot of, and by oak I mean like sweet oak and complex oak, than I've gotten out of pretty much any other Elijah Craig release. This would actually be a fun one to taste up against C920, which is probably my favorite Elijah Craig barrel proof release of the last few years. There is some bitterness here from the oak. It's not heavy, but this is far from refined. It tastes fantastic, but it's rough around the edges. And I don't think that early Elijah Craig barrel proofs were ever meant to be what we would call refined or delicate. Far from them. It's a proof bomb. It's an oak bomb. Big sweetness, touch of nuttiness, and I love it for that. Was it my favorite? Pretty close. Like, this is not an easy decision to make now. But going on the palate and what all these 3 offer, if you watch the channel, you know that I'm kind of a sucker for a low-proof, highly concentrated whiskey. Like a barrel-proof whiskey that's 105 to 110 proof, that delivers oak and sweetness and fruit, maybe a touch of spice, maybe some floral. Like, if you hit all those, I'm in heaven, for sure. None of these hits all those. I get fruit and floral here. I get big wood and spice and sweetness here, but some, as I mentioned, rough edges. I get a really nice nose and some complexity, fruit and oak here, but also just kind of a thin body, not great viscosity or mouthfeel, which this one I get big sweetness. This is number 1, mind you. Big sweetness, big viscosity, big oak, a little bit of spice, not much fruit, not much floral. But the sweetness and the viscosity on this one are so pleasant. I think I'm going to choose number 1 for palate, guys. It just holds up. Every time I come back to it, I'm like, yeah, let's freaking go. 3 is still a little thin. Just not in a taste off where I'm tasting big whiskeys. 3 is just falling flat for me. There's not enough there. The more I taste 1 and 2, the more 4 is rough. It's big and it's brash and it's bold. And if it was the only thing I was drinking and I wasn't tasting it next to whiskeys that I think are just slightly better blended, I think it would really stand out. But in the blind, I'm going to go 1 is 1, 2 is 2 for the palate. All right, I'm going to give number 3 to glass number 4 and number 4 to glass number 3. Again, I loved this. This was great. But in comparison to really fantastic whiskeys, so here we have a problem. If you look at my scores here, glass number 1 is number 4 on the nose and number 1 on the palate. For me, this is Drew P. Number 2 is number 2 on the nose and number 2 on the palate. It's just, I mean, the nose is really nice there and definitely a journey. Number 1 smelled so good at first pass, but the more I came back to it, the more flat it fell. Number 4, big and oaky and hot on the nose, and big and oaky and hot on the palate. And the more I sat with it, kind of the more funky and earthy it got in comparison to the others. So I think after doing this whole lineup, it's clear to me that I think I prefer these 2, number 1 and number 2, to number 3 and number 4, though I love them all. That's why I picked them for this tasting. So which one do I like better, number 1 or number 2? And I've got just a touch of whiskey left in both. I've said this many times, that the taste always wins. You don't sniff your bourbon, you drink it. And while that's true, like, the overall experience of your whiskey kind of matters. And I'm a fairly delicate guy. Many have said that, many will say that in the future. I've been called a delicate flower. That's what my boss refers to me as. A good friend of mine says I have a fragile disposition, mainly physically. He's referring to my physical being, which is true. A very breakable entity am I. So with that, I feel like I need to go with this whiskey that matches me more. I could go either way, and this is tough for me to pick which one is better, but I think number 2 is going to be my favorite. Though I would give just the slightest edge to number 1 on palate. I think the overall experience of 2 matches what I like in a whiskey. And I love them both. I'm glad I have them both. I'm going to nurse them both until they're gone, and then I'll be very sad. But number 2 is the winner. Number 2. So, before we do the big reveal, you guys have kind of seen the colors, but let's bring out these bottles. Let's see what color is what. So we've got George T. Stagg, 2019, as the green smiley face. Old Carter, Batch 5, bourbon, straight Indiana bourbon, as the pinkish smiley face. Four Roses LE small batch 2020. That's the blue smiley face. And then 138.8 proof Elijah Craig pirate bottle barrel proof as the pink. No, orange, sorry. I don't know where I am. Is the orange smiley face. So that's our code. And I should have written that down, because now I gotta look at these, what they are. Let's start with the ones that didn't make the final 2. So let's start with whiskey number 4. This is the one I thought was Elijah Craig, and it is orange, so that is correct. Number 4 was Elijah Craig pirate bottle. Number 3 is the green. I thought that was George T. Stagg, and it is George T. Stagg. Number 1, which was our runner-up, is the pink whiskey, which, yes, is in fact Old Carter Batch 5. So far I'm like really, well, I nailed it. I was right. And number 2, which was our big winner, Four Roses LE. Big winner, Drew P's favorite whiskey right now is this one, Four Roses 2020 LE. Hard to argue with. Again, I love all of these whiskeys. They were the ones where I'm like, these are the ones that I think are my favorites right now. That's why I picked them off the shelf. That's why I tasted them here tonight. And if I could get more of any of them, I would certainly do so. But I have shunned the secondary market, so this will be it. There's always more good whiskey. I'm stoked to see what's out there this year. I mean, I've gotten some pretty good ones already. So while these go away, I have more good stuff. I'll be just fine. So you don't have to feel sorry for me. Nation, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you enjoyed that journey through the ones that I just absolutely love. I do think if you can find an Old Carter Batch 5, the Indiana bourbon, it's great. And anytime you're able to get a Four Roses limited edition small batch, fantastic. George T. Stagg, you already know it's good. Like, was it kind of close to the worst palate for me today out of these 4? Sure, but it's far from like a bad palate. Let's be honest. And then these Elijah Craigs, very hard to come by now. But I mean, the current Elijah Craigs still rock. I mentioned I need to taste this up against C920. I should definitely do that because I really like C920. B521, not as good, still really good, and I'm stoked to see what C tastes like this year. Probably C921. Haven't seen it yet, but I can't wait to try it. Y'all, I mentioned, hit the links below if you're looking for more stuff. Also, give me that thumbs up. I would appreciate that. Comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Helps me, helps you. Help me help you if you help me, I'll make more content for you. It'll work out. It's a symbiotic relationship, as they say. Jedi metachlorian type thing. All right, y'all. Have a good rest of your week. Stay healthy, stay safe, and keep it neat.